This is Corona Chan, the Red Pill. This is going to be different from the other videos where we focus on the coronavirus. I have these reports that reveal a lot about the virus. So we're going to take the Red Pill. If you want to know about the virus, this is a video for you. Let's dive into it. CDG report number 1, Eva Chan edition. She is the Georgia Tech that works on models when it comes to disastrous events. She run down from her recent live stream lecture. The non-vulnerable asymptomatic infected are the ones super spreading and don't even know they are. Masks are not just for their protection, but others' protection from them. Corona Chan came to America much earlier than reported. We'll touch on this later. Because you can argue that that she was here the beginning of last year, and we'll get into that. More infectious than SARS. We'll get into that too. It has to do with the furin protein, something that coronaviruses don't really have, but this one has, which makes it much more infectious. 5 million left Wuhan for holidays right before the lockdown. This was a major crime by China. Opening of non-essential business increased spread. It's obvious. You need to lock down and restructure society to be able to function during a pandemic without getting infected. So it's not just lockdown forever. It's opening them up and taking the right precautions. Hong Kong was testing everyone going in and out and monitoring those testing negative as well. In contrast, Singapore did not do this and had big community spreads. Now keep in mind, based off Worldometer's data today, if you look at the top 20 most impacted countries, none of them are Asian. That we'll get into that. But it's partly because part of their culture has been to wear masks because they've had virus outbreaks before, like the original 2000s, early 2000s SARS outbreak. So the masks work, It's something as obvious. It's something so obvious that yet I still have to keep constantly explaining to people. Contact tracing and quarantine is a must to prevent spread. Yeah, if somebody's infected, you need to find out who they were in contact with before and test them. Without doing this, how can you control the spread? It's just going to keep on spreading. Without these measures, community spread will happen and restart containment process. That's happening right now. Timing is essential. Too many countries acted too late. The thing about this is that in the beginning, countries that began acting, it was a matter that if they would have taken a few more days to act, it would have completely had a huge impact in how the virus would have spread. And so timing was of essence. Even in the beginning, acting just a few days too late, it leads to disaster. Can herd immunity work in the U.S.? Ooh. Thinking about Bobo Johnson right now. Absolutely not. Requires 85% of the population to be infected to have herd immunity. By then, 20% of them will need to go to the hospital, which is out of the country's health system's ability to control. Even if 1% of the population is infected, that would already overwhelm and collapse the healthcare system anywhere, not just the U.S. We're 6 months in since the Wuhan outbreak, and nobody can prove immunity. What we have been able to really show is that the immunity doesn't last that long in the antibodies that we've gotten. And not only that, these newer mutations that are coming out of the virus, like the D164G strain, the antibodies from those who were infected from the original Wuhan strain can't defeat it. U.S. is not testing well. No, so we look at Mike Pence, who bragged that the U.S. was on top of their testing was horrible, and it's in other countries too. I know people personally who were sick and did not qualify for the test. It's ridiculous. Average person doesn't seem to be aware that virus can survive and be infectious for up to 17 days, as in Diamond Princess study, and it was still infectious. That's the thing about this. It could survive in the water for, I think it was 24 or 25 days. and that is bad because if if you remember from the original SARS outbreak, uh, it infected an entire apartment complex because the bad plumbing was letting the fumes of the waste from the toilets uh, affect all the residents. And we know that this virus can spread through urine and feces, and and it can survive on those for a long time. It could survive for hours in the air. And if there's no ventilation in small tight rooms, that's just disaster for infections. Italy responders were traumatized to see a healthy 25-year-old infected suddenly drop dead from heart attack. A colleague told her the story. We've seen people of all ages die from this virus. Nobody seems to know why some really old survive and why some really young die. It's unknown yet, still a mystery. If the public continues to remain ignorant to what the virus can do, they think they are immune from it and go out and protest. And so we've seen this because people are ignorant and chosen to be ignorant. They don't understand what the virus can do or how it spreads, and then they get infected and then they wonder why. Unfortunately, at least 2 years. When will it be over? Unfortunately, at least 2 years if we are lucky and don't have a second wave and have a vaccine. You heard it from a professional, an expert, that this is going to be here for at least 2 years. Spanish flu was what, 10 years? Black plague was also several years. And at the rate things are going, this virus is here to stay. People did not want to listen. It didn't have to be this way. 60 to 80%. Europe is facing the issue of opening. Watch carefully. So she warned us about this. And what's happening? Europe is getting royally wrecked. Sweden's getting royally wrecked. Ukraine doesn't even want to talk about their recovery no more. They blocked that number because it's just a lot of recovered are not really recovered. They're showing symptoms. Many people who have caught this virus months later are still showing symptoms. It's incredible, and it's all there. The data is all there. All you gotta do is look it up. CDC report number 2, dead, recovered, and dying edition. Research: 1 in 20 COVID patients experience long-term on-off symptoms. It's unclear whether long-term means 2 months or 3 or longer. The best parallel is dengue fever. Now, the 1 in 20 I wouldn't really trust. It's based upon the limits of the study. But what it does point out is that why are people who have the virus still showing symptoms months later? That's the question that this data raises that people need to look at. These people may be going back to work and not performing at the top of their game, Spector says, because they get tired, they get winded pretty easily. The lungs never really recover. There is a whole other side to the virus which has not had attention because of the idea that if you are not dead, you are fine. So it's not a matter of it's not a matter of recovered and dead. It's a matter of dead, recovered, and dying. That's what we're seeing. COVID is a multi-system disease which can potentially affect any organ because throughout our body. So the way the virus gets in is that if you look at the original SARS, the way the virus enters the body is through ACE2 receptors. That's the entryway. Everything in the body, your vital organs, your brain, have ACE2 receptors. So the virus can enter in through that way. Now, when it comes to SARS, it didn't have the right proteins to spread anywhere beyond the lung, so it was a respiratory disease. But Corona-chan can do what SARS does to the lungs everywhere because it has an additional furin protein. This is something that people don't really talk about. Corona-chan has a furin protein that allows it to invade the blood and spread throughout the body because furin is the cells that these furin cells. It's in the blood throughout the whole body, and it can travel to the kidneys, the brain, anywhere. And scientists don't understand why this virus has that protein because it's not something that seems natural among coronaviruses. Somebody said that it's like you were to go into the wild and you see a dog with feathers and wings. It doesn't make sense. If it was an evolution, it happened way too fast, obviously, and it just doesn't seem natural. All right. So, COVID is a multi-system disease which can potentially affect any organ. as I was saying. It causes microvascular problems and clots. Lungs, brain, skin, kidneys, and the nervous system may be affected. Also causes sudden death by cardiac arrest, heart failure. There was a case where a healthy woman's heart burst as a result of the virus. Neurological symptoms can be mild, headache, or severe, confusion, delirium, death strokes, coma. Now, skin. People have been, nurses from the ICU have been reporting that people's skin is like melting or like falling off. It's grim, but it's not something that's been really explored too often. People who have turned black from this virus. The blood begins to become sludgy and black. This is a famous case in Wuhan where two doctors from the original outbreak got that. One of them died 5 months later. So you catch the virus and it killed you 5 months later. That's that's incredible. We'll touch on delirium and the asterisks, all that stuff later. Okay. An online survey of 151 medical professionals who fell ill in March found 68 are still unable to work. A further 26 went back, only to stop again when symptoms returned. Now, the ratio of who this happens to, that's irrelevant. The main thing to focus on is that this happens to people, and that is the issue. It appears coronavirus may be a chronic condition. How long it persists for is unknown, and it's still unknown. The symptoms can be serious and wide-ranging, affecting the lungs, heart, brain, kidneys, stomach, and nervous system. Headaches, shortness of breath, sore throat, and feeling exhausted are common. So is recovery followed by frequent relapses? Again, it is unknown what percentage of people infected will end this way. It's unknown. And once again, I can't stress enough, the fact that it happens is the issue. Because people are saying, oh, well, they only study so... No, like, the fact that it's happening should make you alert, We don't know what is causing prolonged COVID. Is it the ongoing initial illness, or is it an inflammatory reaction, or is it a post-viral syndrome? We don't know. Again, the thing about all these articles and papers that I'm reading is that I keep seeing, we don't know. We're not sure. We need more tests. We need more follow-ups. We don't know what the prognosis is or what the long-term consequences are. I wonder how many people are having prolonged illness and what the impact is on the... sorry, some vehicle passed by. I thought it was an ambulance. I wonder how many people are having prolonged illness and what the impact is on the workforce, for example. Oh, man, the meat... So many meat packing factories have been having outbreaks. It's going to affect the food. We'll get into that later. It's scary to have an illness for which there isn't any treatment and that doesn't seem to be going away. There is no vaccine. The possibility of a vaccine is really bad. We'll get into that later. See, afterward, SARS survivors 10 years later became so sick they were unable to work. Yeah, the original SARS outbreak in 2003, a lot of people that survived it never recovered. It's not not commonly known. She is still a mystery. If those blessed can shake off the symptoms for months, what will happen when their illness mixes with other viruses like influenza? So you have a virus that attacks the immune system, similar to how HIV/AIDS works. If it were to not go away, or if it's there for a long time, what will happen when you catch other viruses? Your body will not be able to really fight it off. So something like a common cold could kill you. CDC report number 3, delirious psychotic death edition. Coronachan can cause hallucinations, delirium, and memory problems in the ICU rooms. Many patients experience terrifying hallucinations, which may return in recovery as nightmares and PTSD, or false memories. Patients would have these vivid nightmares, like experiences of people torturing them and kidnapping them. Sorry, I was just thinking about how long I can make the video. I think I might be... Well, anyways, they saw blood dripping down the walls and seeing people with animal heads walking around, or children are floating by with no faces. I thought one of the nurses had taken a circular saw and just buzzed my arm off and then just buzzed off both my legs. Another circular saw came through the wall and cut my face in half. I was positive they were trying to kill me. We had a young patient. He thought the nurses were restraining his arms and attaching snakes to draw blood from him. We had patients convinced they were being put into an oven when placed under the MRI. Let me see where I'm at, because I want to upload the whole video, but let's see. Some said they hallucinated being sexually assaulted. Research shows 70 to 75% of patients on ventilators traditionally develop delirium. Delirious patients often don't realize they're in the hospital. Being said, they don't recognize their family. And this is something that there's more to it, to this. It's still happening. Now there's a lot of reports of this happening. This means thousands of people have died thinking they were being tortured or in hell. That's bleak. Patients who develop delirium, which can be an early sign of brain injury, are more likely to die than others. Those who survive often endure lengthy hospitalizations and are more likely to develop a long-term disability. Hospitals have banned visitors, leaving COVID-19 patients to suffer alone. You're by yourself. I was alone for 4, 5, 6 weeks without my kids, without my support system. In your head, you're almost dying. How do you get over that and get back out into the world like nothing happened? In a recent article in Clinical Care, researchers said the intensive care unit has become a delirium factory. Future report number 4, in a lab edition. You buckled in yet? Altered virus. It's not natural, like finding a dog with wings. There had to be lab tinkering. Take a back coronavirus that is not infectious to humans. Force its selection by culturing it with cells that express human ACE2 receptor, which such cells having been created many years ago to culture SARS coronaviruses, and you can force the bat virus to adapt to infect human cells via mutations in its spike protein, increasing ability to bind to human ACE2, but reducing bat ACE2 binding. So like I said, the virus spreads through your body by attaching to ACE2 receptors, and there's more to it, and I will get to that later. Leading immunologists and geneticists have told Daily Telegraph there are two unusual aspects of COVID-19 that raise the possibility it was man-made rather than a natural occurring virus. Virus binds to human ACE2 receptor cells more strongly than it does to any other animal, including bats. It has a furin cleavage site that its closest genetic bat coronavirus relatives, RATG13, does not have. This site makes it significantly more infectious. More on that later with the mutations. Geneticist Dr. Ronan Shemesh, who's working on treatment for COVID-19, said in his opinion the virus was more likely created in a laboratory than evolved naturally in nature. There are many reasons to believe that the COVID-19 generating SARS-CoV-2 was generated in a lab, most probably by method of genetic engineering, he said. I believe that this is the only way an insertion like the furin protease cleavage site could have been introduced directly at the right place and become effective. Dr. Shemesh points to the insertion of a furin site as the most unusual aspect of COVID-19. I believe that the most important issue about the differences between all coronavirus types is the insertion of a furin protease, the type of their furin protease cleavage site at the spike protein of SARS-CoV-2, he said. Such an insertion is very rare in evolution. The addition of such 4 amino acids alone in the course of only 20 years is very unlikely. And they were saying this since the very beginning. I think this is somebody from Israel. Future report number 5, Yemen is kill edition. Yemen's collapse leaves it completely vulnerable to Corona-Chan. The hospitals are closing their doors on the infected. Piles of dead bodies cleansed by Corona-Chan labeled as unidentified bodies from the war to cover up the epidemic. Corona-Chan, an ethically selective virus, poses an even greater danger since Yemen's population is an ethnicity identified as being more at risk. Now, the reason why I'm saying it's an ethically selective virus is because the virus was tested on different types of monkeys. And the virus happened to affect a particular species of monkey more than the rest. And then so we ended up finding out that the way it affects you depends on your race. Because then there are more studies done, and we find out that people from Pakistan or people who are black are affected more, whereas white people or Asians are affected less. Still lethal, you still can die, but there's a selectivity process that goes through. Social media on Corona-Chan is being suppressed in Yemen. Rebels find the war a convenience to hide the numbers. COVID-19 has already killed many people. The real numbers are much more than official figures. If they continue to suppress information, the outbreak will infect and kill many more. The world needs to know the truth. Health Minister of Yemen says they won't publish the numbers because it will have a heavy and terrifying toll on people's psychological health. That is a criminal attempt to just hide the truth. We deserve to know. That damage control, that cope. Test results aren't released and families have no confirmation if their relatives died from Corona. Now we see people dying in the streets. Healthcare providers are passing away. The country is running out of its healthcare providers. And this is all over. This is happening all over the world in the biggest hit areas. Bad time to be a doctor. They said be a doctor and look what happens. Local health officials and activists say at least 46 medical workers have been killed by Corona in just Yemen alone. Imagine the world. So I thought I heard somebody near me. I'm recording this in my car. Secret recordings are not being released showing Yemen's mass graves. And there's, sources upon sources. You can just dig into it yourself. CDG report number 6. Guatemala has fallen edition. Hail for the successful containment. This is going to tell you why Latin America got hit so hard. And it's the U.S.'s fault. So let's dive into this. Hail for the successful containment, but now dealing with a collapsing healthcare system. President on Thursday expressed doubt that the U.S. could still be considered an ally for sending infected immigrants deported from America that caused community spreads. When some countries resisted continued deportations, U.S. officials said they would screen migrants slated for removal, but they did not commit to administering coronavirus tests. The screenings, which consist primarily of taking a person's temperature, have failed to detect cases. U.S. has returned thousands of people across the Western Hemisphere in April. The deportees arrive at a bus station where migrants officials receive them, but they don't have serious health protocol in place, Gallardo said. They just check for fevers and that's it. So the president can cry and say, "Oh, it's America's fault," but you didn't even take the precautions to receive them. It's your fault too. Looks like America gave the impression they were properly screening them when they weren't. And these countries, many who are poor and have crooked governments, they didn't make enough effort to follow protocol on receiving them. We now have to treat a disease that wasn't created here, he said. But Guatemalan hospitals don't have enough room for quarantine patients. Just a few days ago, doctors in hospitals and nurses have been out into the streets, outside the hospitals, protesting that they don't have enough material to take care of the patients. Suddenly, as you mentioned, the healthcare system in Guatemala is overwhelmed. We have reached a little over 1,300 cases. This is a few days ago. Active cases, it's gotten much worse now. It gets worse every single day now, if you look at the numbers on barometers. Here in Guatemala, and this has put our health system really on the edge of their seats. 18 of the president's staff members from his office just tested positive, and he is not working remotely and got tested himself. I think he was negative. Frustrated, the Minister of Health called the U.S. the Wuhan of the Americas. So that, these countries are they're falling one by one. All right. Daily CG report number 7, the fraud Judy Mikovits. This woman deserves to be... This woman and Tedros from the WHO, they deserve to be put up against the wall and shot. She is the sensation behind the pandemic normies are flocking behind. They take her seriously and actually follow her advice. She is a dangerous woman putting lives in danger. What is the nonsense she promotes? Lockdowns don't work. All lockdowns must end immediately. Herd immunity already happened. You don't need gloves or masks. The masks are what is killing people. Corona is not what is killing people. She throws a little 5G conspiracy but doesn't directly say it. Corona is just the flu. Jesus Christ. I post this to show the type of garbage she is promoting with her pandemic movie. She wins normies over because her pandemic movie got good advertisement. Google was involved. And keep in mind, this woman is crying that, I got censored, I got taken down. But pandemic has been seen by millions, and she has a #1 book out on Amazon. So her crying about being censored is just trash. Don't fall for it. Since the normies don't do research or know science, of course she was able to fool them and gain a huge following. Again, a lot of what she says, or most of what she says, is like she can't even prove it. And it's backwards. It's opposite to the world of science. You know, even people I follow who I thought were red pilled have flocked behind her. Well, that's because Akun is like promoting. Akun also has a coronavirus general, but they have kind of lost track. 4chan is surprisingly better, maybe even the best one from all the boards. Because Wizard-chan, on the other chans, the threads just move by too slow. CVG is in 4chan is the most consistent one. She pulls you in with a few truths. Again, this is what they do, because there are many more like her. There are lots of fake doctors saying that viruses don't exist and a lot of things. And the way they pull you in is they tell you a little bit of truth, like bashing the manlet Fauci, talking about how sketchy vaccines are. And now that you're paying attention, now that you see some credibility in the person, they go full moron and start denying the virus and telling you masks are what's killing people. LOL. Again, she never backs up her claims. She's a failed and debunked scientist who hasn't written new papers in over a decade. Literally defies science in her ridiculous claims. Like the one paper that she really, really rolled on, she had to redact. And she still goes on saying that, I wrote this paper, but she won't say that it got redacted. She's one of many grifters, fake doctors denying the virus exists, and radicalizing normies to go out with guns and no masks to get infected, and rounded up by the FBI. Andrew Kaufman's another one. Andrew Kaufman. Now, what happened after this post? In Orange County in my state, God, go away. In Orange County in my state, they got rid of the mask rule because people were sending death threats to the officials. And who are these people? People who watch this film and listen to her. And InfoWars with Alex Jones, they're doing the same thing. And all these other doctors like Kaufman just convincing normies that with all this ridiculousness and people are laughing at America now. People are laughing at America because they turned masks into a political issue when it's obvious and as wet as water obvious that the masks help. But I mean, America is a very dumb country. So it's not a surprise they're doing the worst in the world. But they don't have Brazil to their deaths because they have a different strain, I think. No, they have a lot of deaths too because of the mutated strain hit New York. Well, we'll get into that later. Anyways, the whole point is to just expose this faulty scientist. Future Report number 8, June, USA edition, part 1. So these are about the beginning of the collapse in America by CoronaCham, state by state. Number of patients on ventilators in our Arizona ICUs has quadrupled. Source. Texas reports record number of hospitalized corona patients after early reopen. Source. North Carolina hospitalizations from corona continue to grow. 774 people currently hospitalized, setting a record for the first time in June. And again, I show these sources. Oregon sees highest single-day corona case increase since pandemic began. A Seattle fishing company has had more than 100 plus cases on its ships heading to Alaska. Wow, I can't believe this. We had done so much. Each company had worked so hard to try to avoid this happening. Arkansas cases up by 314. Hospitalizations jump 18% overnight. Health officials call spike in Florida cases red flag. Said past 2 weeks, positive cases have increased in the county by 44%, or 527 cases. New Mexico Health Department shows COVID-19 infections among healthcare workers in the state have spiked as intensive care units remain full and nurses and first responders call for more PPE. Now, the little manlet Fauci, he came out recently and said that he admitted that he lied in the beginning that you don't have to wear masks because they were trying to hoard them all for the medical workers. He lied to the American public and told them the masks were not that effective. And because of what he said, now he has blood on his hands. And of course he went back, now he's saying that you need the masks, but the damage has been done. Mississippi hasn't seen a drop-off in COVID-19 cases. It's why you're hearing state officials pleading yet again this week for folks to take personal responsibility. State Health Officer Dr. Dobbs, it's happening. Literally just when it came out and said it's happening. Over the weekend, we had the most ventilated patients with COVID-19 we had this whole time. Infectious disease doctor says South Carolina should expect rise in coronavirus cases. They've shut down multiple bars and restaurants in South Carolina, Texas, Arizona. It's happening all over the place. We're reaching levels that we didn't really see since the beginning. Many of them are in their wave 2, but wave 1 never really finished. So they kind of like Eva Chan told us, the wave 1 has interlapped with wave 2. No, the COVID-19 pandemic isn't over. Answers to questions after Utah's recent spike. Has the curve been flattened yet, as we've seen past 2 weeks? The short answer here is no. Just putting it bluntly. Tennessee's 4-day average of new COVID-19 cases over the past week have reached levels not seen since early May. Again, these are not wave 2. They have merged with wave 1. If you look at the charts and look at the graphs, a lot of these states that are getting hot right now, they never recovered from the first wave. It just spiked back up all of a sudden after a slight fall. CDG report number 9, USA edition part 2. Washington COVID-19 case continues to climb, especially in the young. National Guard suffered outbreak after exposure to the protests. Missouri reports another triple-digit jump in cases. Death toll increased back to May's numbers. Care Center in Clay County on Monday reported an outbreak with 53 cases. Patients include residents, staff. A Kentucky minister who helped win a Kentucky court case allowing in-person attendance for church services has now had to shut down its church because 18 of his congregants tested positive for COVID-19. Now, we have a lot of people saying, oh, I can't get infected because I'm being protected by the blood of Jesus. But no, we're having massive church outbreaks. Health response officials note Nevada's COVID-19 data is showing an above-average daily increase in COVID-19 cases throughout the state. It's now the 4th consecutive daily increase of COVID-19 hospitalizations in the state. As cases rise, healthcare workers' infections rise in Idaho, endangering stage 4 reopening. 1 in 6 Idahoans may not have enough food to eat this year due to pandemic. Now, the thing about the food is, this is not something that happens fast. It's something that builds slowly, and as the months go by, it'll then just hit you in the face. We've already seen food shortages, but what we're seeing is the beginning of it. COVID-19 outbreak starting in the city of Winooski, Vermont on Memorial Day has grown to 62 cases, including 24 children, and spread into communities. You know, the thing is, children are dying too. You know, it's just everybody's dying. It doesn't care your race, age, how healthy you are, it'll wipe you out. But we don't know yet how that works. A Vermont nursing home's 64-day COVID siege. They're all going to die. I mean, it's just a way to put it bluntly. I feel like I murdered him by putting him in there, said Mike of his father. Man. Weekend COVID cases rise in Hawaii as state figures out a plan to welcome visitors back. The state was warned opening up to mainland tourism without required testing before travel will overwhelm state's hospitals. The rise in Montana's case count came as health officials nationwide warned that protests sparked by the police killing of George Floyd could lead to additional COVID-19 outbreaks. Now, all this is happening from early reopens. All right? We still have not felt the hit of the protests yet, but we will pretty soon. These are from a couple of days ago. I can tell you that it's gotten much worse today. They have to make a second report because, it just gets worse and worse and worse. CBG report number 10, the Resistance Edition. 7 countries that are tackling COVID-19. What did they do? Where are we at? All right. Greenland decided to isolate itself from the rest of the world to contain the spread of the virus and to win time. And it ultimately paid off. As of now, they don't have any active cases. Bhutan, led by science and quick preventative action managed to contain the spread of the deadly virus. They shut down borders pretty early on. They were good with testing and tracking patients when they worked together as a community. Vietnam, they were quick to gather information and declared an outbreak. They also took aggressive preventive measures by ramping up their public health response. Taiwan's unique model to battle the virus with the help of technology is quite effective and good. With strict quarantine, cell phone tracking, and government database, officials contain the spread of the virus. Citizens also voluntarily partnered with the government to create a database network to track patients. Slovakia, public health care authorities stocking up protective equipment and testing kits. They implemented proper tracking, and the government's quick decision to announce a nationwide lockdown proved effective. Iceland started testing early. Again, these countries acted early. In America, a lot of people don't even believe that the virus exists because they fell for the pandemic misinformation. Iceland started testing early. They remain one step ahead of the pandemic by preparing for it 1 month before it arrived in the nation. Mass level testing and strict quarantine protocols. Though they appear to have contained it, the war is not over yet. But it goes to show you what Brazil, America, and other countries could have done to at least prevent the disaster they are in now. New Zealand is also praised, but they are not having outbreaks from outsiders. And Iceland has been getting cases lately. So they're losing. They're doing good, but, they're starting to crumble. Siege report number 11, Karanchan Sewage Expansion Pack. Recombination Edition. Sewage of human waste is spreading the virus to wildlife near the treatment plants, including bats, who can mix Karanchan with other coronaviruses and then pass it back to humans more lethal than before. Beware sewage leaks near you. The study, blah, blah, blah. This proposed model is premised on transmission of SARS-CoV-2 from human feces through municipal waste, water treatment plants into the natural aquatic environment where potential wildlife hosts become infected. Although we focus on North America, our conceptual model could apply to other parts of the globe as well. Remember Brazilian banana. We believe the existing evidence also supports the plausibility of novel coronaviruses, such as SARS-CoV-2, spilling over to new wildlife hosts through fecal shedding by infected humans and introduction to the natural aquatic environment via the wastewater treatment system. Such scrutiny could integrate surveillance of key wildlife species, such as bats and raccoons, which have the potential for acquiring coronavirus from their aquatic environments. Brace for recombination effects. However, bats remain the most likely species where spillover of SARS-CoV-2 might occur. Bats drink directly from natural water sources, such as lakes, ponds, and slow-flowing streams and rivers, by swooping over the water sources and lapping at the surface. Of particular concern is whether there is the potential of recombination of SARS-CoV-2 with other bat coronaviruses should spillover of SARS-CoV-2 occur in bat populations. So, it's theorized this might happen in Brazil because they are getting hit real hard, and oddly enough, somebody had warned about Brazilian bats way in the beginning of the year. So this is something peculiar, that person was onto. Siege report number 12 with the South Korean religious death cult Wuhan connection. A super spreader event at the church's Daegu temple triggered half of South Korea's COVID-19 infections. Patient 31 didn't get tested thinking it was a mild cough. She came in contact with over 1,000 members during their tightly packed prayer services. Any official leading the charge against COVID-19 tested positive. An official leading the charge against COVID-19 tested positive. Oh, sorry about that. Revealing he was a member after the fact. So this guy got infected, right? But he didn't say he was a member of the cult until after he tested positive. What did I do? All right, let's see. Members are ordered to hide their membership from family, and are banned from using the internet. A lot of people are angry at church members who became unable to track after news of patient 31 broke. The infected Shinjianchi members, I probably said that wrong, members were spreading coronavirus by sharing closed-off spaces and refusing to quarantine. They wore no glasses or face masks and were encouraged to come if sick. They were told to lie about being members once they got infected. Many would not cooperate with the government to help contain the spread. Shuzhenshi is also linked to the Wuhan outbreak. The sect gathered in Wuhan as a secret organization during the beginning of the outbreak. They defied the outbreak by continuing services. Church admitted to having 300 members in Wuhan. After holding services, they returned to South Korea with the virus. Members were also in quarantine in Wuhan itself, though some members most likely ignored it. A member defended the Wuhan sect, saying they worked hard to recruit and promote the faith. But the newspaper also reported that the member sidestepped questions about whether Shinjonchi members in Wuhan returned to South Korea. South Korea news agency News reported Shinjonchi had opened a church in Wuhan last year, but removed its existence from their website. The church would not comment. Weeks later, the leader of cult apologized as Seoul's mayor filed a lawsuit accusing the group of murder and injury for the spread of the virus. Now, this ties into George Webb. George Webb is a journalist who talked about this, but had nothing to back it up. But this report really goes into it and shows you the connection that he failed to find out. And he claims that patient zero was, in the Wuhan games and went back to America with it. No, we'll see, because this could have possibly gotten to America beginning of last year, and we'll look into that when we get to the right report. CG report number 13. Would you like some Corona Chan with that edition? Outbreak in Houston, Texas restaurants. Taste of Texas temporarily closed after a team member tested positive. Relish restaurant and bar temporarily closed after one of its employees tested positive. The restaurant said it will reopen June 22nd. La Lucha in Superica, one employee tested positive for COVID-19, reopening on June 19th. Willie's Kitchen and Cocktails, new seafood restaurant in Oak Forest, announced on June 4th it will temporarily close after an employee tested positive. Owner Kenbridge said that the restaurant is now in the clear. Pepe's Cafe, the restaurant at 12313 Katy Freeway, announced it temporarily closed after one of its employees tested positive for COVID-19. It will reopen on June 16th. Yegas Cafe and Beerfoot Brewery. They have. So they said we had an employee test positive. Again, I decided to allow any employee for their personal sanity to go through, damage control going on there. But you get the point. Nobi's shut down. Musafir closed after staff affected positive. FM Kitchen and Bar announced on Instagram that it would temporarily close after it got infection with non-customer facing employees. Look at that damage control. Atlas Blue posted a notice on Facebook on June 11th that one of its employees tested positive for COVID-19. The Heights restaurant temporarily closed. They reopened Monday. So the thing about this is that they don't have to go public with it. They kind of took advantage of the law to hide the cases, but these bars decided to be transparent and just say it anyways. So good for them. CG report number 14, lungs edition. COVID-19 can damage lungs of victims beyond recognition, expert says. It created such a massive damage in those who spent more than a month in hospital that it resulted in complete disruption of the lung architecture, said Professor Mauro Giacca of King's College London. In findings, he said show the potential for real problems after survival. He told the Lord's Science and Technology Committee that he had studied the autopsies of patients and discovered large amounts of the virus persisting in lungs, as well as highly unusual fused cells. What you find in the lungs of people who have stayed with the disease for more than a month before dying is something completely different from normal pneumonia. Influenza or the SARS virus, he said, you see massive thrombosis. There's a complete disruption of the lung architecture. In some lights, you can't even distinguish it that it used to be a lung. There are a large number of very big fused cells, which are virus positive, with as many as 10-15 nuclei. He said, I am convinced this explains the unique pathology of COVID-19. This is not a disease caused by a virus which kills cells, which have profound implications for therapy. His evidence came as the Lord's Committee heard from the medical scientists and doctors grappling with the nature of COVID-19 6 months after its emergence in Europe, its behavior, treatments, vaccines, and the possibility of immunity. So in this article, they took out the lung of a woman that needed a double lung transplant, and the lung looked Horrible. It looked like grilled cheese. It was completely destroyed. Seizure report number 15, Corona Chan update, a potentially lethal blood clotting human crippling virus. So this is research being done a little later as we begin to kind of learn more about the virus. Okay, whoa. Where did I go? Let's see where I'm at. Okay. Again, this virus is a virus that attacks the blood vessels. It is not a respiratory virus. The possible long-term health impacts of being infected with the coronavirus. In survival Facebook groups, people share their symptoms of crippling fatigue, feeling groggy or fuzzy-headed, joint pain and deep bone aches, chest pain, heart palpitations, headaches, dizziness, and insomnia, and these are all after they've recovered from the cough and fever of the primary infection. There is growing concern about the potential long-term consequences of COVID-19, with reports of symptoms lingering for weeks and even months. Survivors want to know how long these afflictions will last, or if they'll ever completely go away. Not to mention what might be waiting around the corner in the months and years to come. So we don't know. We don't know that. There is no answer to that. Because scientifically, a long-term follow-up has to last at least a year. So we don't know. Just have fun with the glass lungs. Rizzo says there is a risk of scarring and more permanent lung damage in people who are hospitalized and ventilated. A lot of times, the post-recovery chest x-ray and CAT scans of the chest will show areas of scarring that may never really completely improve. That's going to have to be, that's fibrosis, permanent lung damage. That's going to have to be taken as a potential sign that they won't be able to get back to the lung function they had prior to the illness, he says. Again, I'm not saying this is the majority of people, but it certainly can leave a fair amount of impairment in those who are in the hospital for a number of weeks. Keep in mind, many survivors from the original SARS outbreak were left with permanent and crippling lung damage. Heart. Over the past 2 months, one of the deadliest effects of COVID-19 that has emerged is its impact on the heart. If you remember back when the outbreak was really, really bad in New York, a lot of people were dying, falling dead of cardiac arrest in their homes. Had to be picked up. By some estimates, 20 to 30% of hospitalized patients experience heart problems, and cardiovascular complications contribute to 40% of all deaths. So far, it's unclear what's behind these different cardiovascular symptoms. It's the blood clotting, the attack on the blood, which also means doctors haven't identified adequate treatments. That's big because people are being treated the wrong way for it, and that can cause more problems. Yet, in some cases, the people who are experiencing heart problems with COVID-19 already have high blood pressure or a heart disease, but in other instances, there were no known risk factors. If the patient has the normal reason for having a heart attack, meaning that they have atherosclerosis with a coronary artery occlusion, then I think if it's recognized and treated, they should have a good prognosis, Jessup says. What we don't know is what happens to people who come into the hospital and it looks like they have a heart attack, but they really have COVID-19 infections, and there is no blockage in the artery. We don't know if those patients are less likely to survive. We don't know really the best treatment to give them right now. There we go with the we don't know things. Cardiovascular complications are not unique to COVID-19. Many infections can cause myocarditis, the technical name of inflammation of the heart, which is typically thought to be a side effect of the body's inflammatory immune response. Most people recover from the myocarditis on their own, but some people do experience permanent damage to the heart's muscle. Even blood clots are not unheard of with viruses. Doctors saw similar evidence of blood clotting during the 2003 SARS outbreak. If caught early, these complications can be treated with medication. However, another follow-up study of recovered SARS patients showed that 44% had various cardiovascular abnormalities 12 years after infection. There was a doctor that was looking at brain autopsies of Corona Chan victims, and he saw in real time blood clots forming while he was trying to undo them. And that's, it's like Contagion, where you have the scene where the doctor's looking at the brain and tells the guy, "Oh man, step back, call everyone." For the brain, there's mounting evidence that SARS-CoV-2 also impacts the brain. In a study of 214 COVID-19 patients, one-third experienced neurological symptoms, including dizziness, headache, and cognitive impairment. Scientists aren't clear, however, what's behind the symptoms. It could be that the virus is directly infecting neurons. It could be the inflammatory immune response, or it could be damage from oxygen deprivation. Karonik says that with so little known about the root cause of the neurological problems, experts can't predict whether these symptoms will be temporary or permanent. There is no long-term follow-up with any of those patients, long-term being at least a year, he says, as I was saying. We don't know. There it goes again. We don't know. It is possible the changes will be permanent. Time will tell if this happens or not. Immune system. Another consideration of how SARS-CoV-2 could impact a person's risk for other infections. In a recent study, researchers found that 20% of the people with COVID-19 were also infected with other viruses, including influenza, rhinovirus, and respiratory syncytial virus. Typically, the presence of one virus decreases a person's risk of another infection because the immune system is already activated. At the root of the issue is a type of protein called interferon that's released with the first wave of the immune response and interferes with the virus' ability to replicate. This protein is produced by the cell that's attacked by the virus, and its job is to push back the virus. And what happens is that when the infected cell has produced the interferon, what we understand is that some of that interferon then seeps into non-infected cells that are adjacent and sits there waiting to become a protector of that cell, explains Harvard professor of medicine Mundi Mehra, MD. So when the second virus, for instance, comes back in a certain period of time, there may actually be partial immunity for that second infection. One reason the novel coronavirus is so pernicious is that it appears to suppress these interferons, meaning that not only is the COVID-19 infection worse, but there may also be a heightened risk for future infections. This virus teaches the cell somehow to stop making interferon. I've seen that stated before after this. And so it actually reduces your immunity to either second infections or potentially to even other viruses, says Mehra. If this is the case, there is a real concern that people who recover from COVID-19 could have an increased risk for influenza in the winter. I was just saying that earlier. It's going to be a deadly flu season. While the research on the novel coronavirus impact on interference is preliminary, SARS and MERS had a similar effect on the immune system. And there are several cases of people infected with MERS also contracting influenza and tuberculosis. Overall well-being. A final consideration is the consequence of hospitalization of weeks of being bedbound on the body's recovery. There are people who have lost like 65 pounds in 4 days. It's ridiculous. The consensus is that I think it was 45 pounds. Yeah, 45. The consensus is that the worse someone's health was before they got infected, and the more severe the coronavirus infection was, the longer it will take them to regain their strength. It could take months to a year for some of that recovery to occur, says Rizzo. But as you might suspect, it's going to vary from individual to individual, again, based on what is their condition prior to that care and how severe was their case. There are big differences in how that affects your physical condition, your mental conditioning, and your emotional conditioning. Post-intensive care syndrome and post-viral fatigue syndrome, general terms for the physical and cognitive impairment that can follow serious illnesses, are both concerns for COVID-19, with post-intensive care syndrome being sedated and bedbound in the ICU can result in muscle atrophy, problems with memory and concentration, and even emotional issues similar to post-traumatic stress syndrome. Now, the ventilators aren't working. Most people who are on them are dying. People are not being treated the right way, and using the wrong treatment adds to the damage to the body. Even in people who weren't hospitalized for COVID-19, recovery can be a long, slow journey as indicated by the experiences of the members of the Survivors Corps group. Post-viral fatigue syndrome is one potential explanation for the chronic fatigue, headaches, joint and muscle pain, and cognitive fuzziness that can linger after a viral illness. Doctors aren't entirely sure what causes the syndrome. Again, we just don't know a lot, naming a lingering infection, inflammation in the brain, or an overreaction of the immune system as possible sources. There is also no real treatment for the condition, and while symptoms often resolve after a few months, some cases may be permanent. Looking forward, because so much is still unknown about the novel coronavirus, its symptoms, and the potential for long-term consequences, Yusuf from the AHA says it's imperative that survivors volunteer to be part of scientific studies about the illness. There's going to be a huge need for us to learn about the long-term effects. Right now, a lot of the emphasis is about what's going on in the hospital. But what will be really key is to find out what happens outside the hospital, she says. It's important to make note of that. Coronavirus may be a blood vessel disease, which explains everything. COVID-19, though of only being a respiratory virus, now has been found to cause life-threatening blood clots. After came death strokes, killing young people. Next, it was comatose, painful swelling. What do these symptoms have in common? Impaired blood circulation. Also, 40% of deaths from COVID-19 are related to cardiovascular complications, looking more like a vascular infection instead of a respiratory one. There is now a growing body of evidence to support the theory that the novel coronavirus can infect blood vessels, which could explain not only the high prevalence of blood clots, strokes, and heart attacks, but also provide an answer for the diverse set of head-to-toe symptoms that have emerged. All these COVID-associated complications were a mystery. We see blood clotting, we see kidney damage, we see inflammation of the heart, we see stroke, we see encephalitis, swelling of the brain, a whole myriad of seemingly unconnected phenomenon that you do not normally see with SARS, H1N1, or most infectious diseases. This virus is probably a vasculotropic virus. That's what it is. And there's more to it than that too, meaning that it affects the blood vessels. In April, in The Lancet, a team of scientists discovered that the SARS-CoV-2 virus can infect the endothelial cells that line the inside of blood vessels. And endothelial cells protect the cardiovascular system, and they release proteins that influence everything from blood clotting to the immune response. In the paper, the scientists showed damage to endothelial cells in the lungs, heart, kidneys, liver, and intestines in people who catch COVID-19. The concept that's emerging is that this is not a respiratory illness alone. This is a respiratory illness to start with. That's very important to start with, because the end game is somewhere else. But it is actually a vascular illness that kills people through its involvement of the vasculature. SARS-CoV-2 enters the body through ACE2 receptors, present on the surface of cells that line the respiratory tract in the nose and throat. Once in the lungs, the virus appears to move from the alveoli, the air sacs in the lung, into the blood vessels, which are also rich in ACE2 receptors. The virus enters the lung, it destroys the lung tissue, and people start coughing. The destruction of the lung tissue breaks open some blood vessels, Mira explains. Then it starts to infect endothelial cell after endothelial cell creates a local immune response and inflames the endothelium. So you breathe in Corona Chan, and she starts destroying your lungs bleed, and as your lungs bleed, the virus uses its furin protein to go into the blood and spread throughout the body, eventually ending up in your brain, where the real fun starts. A respiratory virus infecting blood cells and circulating through the body is virtually unheard of. Influenza viruses like H1N1 are not known to do this. In the original SARS virus, a sister coronavirus to the current infection, did not spread past the lung. Other types of viruses such as Ebola or dengue can damage endothelial cells, but they are very different from viruses that typically infect lungs. Berher Lee, MD, a professor of microbiology at the Icahn School of Medicine at Mount Sinai, says the difference between SARS and CoV-2 likely stems from an extra protein each of the viruses requires to activate and spread. Although both viruses dock onto the cells through ACE2 receptors, another protein is needed to crack open the virus so its genetic material can get into the infected cell. The additional protein the original SARS virus requires is only present in lung tissue. All right? Keep that in mind. SARS was only a respiratory disease for the most part. But the protein in SARS-CoV-2 to activate is present but the protein for SARS-CoV-2 to activate is present in all cells, especially endothelial cells. Sorry, I heard some noises outside. In SARS-1, the protein that's required to cleave it is likely present only in the lung environment, so that's where it can replicate. To my knowledge, it doesn't really go systemic, Lee says. SARS-CoV-2 is cleaved with a protein called furin. There it is again, the furin protein. And that's a big danger because furin is present in all our cells. It's ubiquitous. All cells. That it is this furin protein that makes coronachan spread throughout the entire body. SARS can do that. An infection of the blood vessels would explain many of the weird tendencies of COVID-19, like the high rates of blood clots. Endothelial cells, EC, help regulate clot formation by sending out proteins that turn the coagulation system on or off. The cells also help ensure that blood flows smoothly and doesn't get caught in any rough edges on the blood vessel walls. The EC layer is in part responsible for clot regulation. It inhibits clot formation through a variety of ways, says Sethi. Disruption may cause blood clots. EC damage might account for the high rates of cardiovascular damage and seemingly spontaneous heart attacks in people with COVID-19, too. Damage causes inflammation in the blood vessels, and that can cause accumulated plaque to rupture, causing heart attack, meaning anyone who has plaque in their blood vessels might normally have remained stable or controlled with medication is suddenly a higher risk for a heart attack. EC dysfunction is linked towards myocardial infarction also. There goes myocardosis again. Blood vessel damage could also explain why people with pre-existing conditions like high blood pressure, high cholesterol, diabetes, and heart disease are at a much higher risk for severe complications from a virus that's supposed to just infect the lungs. All of those diseases cause EC cell dysfunction, and the additional damage and inflammation in the blood vessels caused by the infection could push them over the edge and cause serious problems. The theory could even solve the mystery of why ventilation is not working, because it's not working. They move air into the lungs, and this is why it doesn't work. They move air into the lungs, but the exchange of oxygen in the blood relies in functioning blood vessels in the lungs. If you have blood clots within the blood vessels that are required for complete oxygen exchange, even if you're moving air in and out of the airways, if the circulation is blocked, the full benefits of mechanical ventilation support are somewhat thwarted, says Lee. So the vents don't work because the virus attacks the blood. Since the virus attacks the blood, even though the vents are pushing air into you, the blood, because it's damaged, cannot receive the oxygen. That's what happens. That's why people are mostly dying on vents. Like, once you get put on the vent, it's a good chance you're going to die. A new paper published last week in New England Journal... Where are we at? Let's see. Oh, wow. Breaking an hour. A new paper published last week in the New England Journal of Medicine, in which Lee is a co-author, found widespread evidence of blood clots and infection in the endothelial cells in the lungs of people who died from COVID-19. This was in stark contrast to people who died from H1N1, who had 9 times fewer blood clots in the lungs. Even the structure of the blood vessels was different in the COVID-19 lungs, with many more new branches that likely formed after the original blood vessels were damaged. We saw blood clots everywhere, Lee says. We were observing virus particles filling up the endothelial cell like filling up a gumball machine. The endothelial cell swells and the cell membrane starts to break down. And now you have a layer of injured endothelium. Finally, the infection of the blood vessels may be how the virus travels through the body and infects other organs. Something that's atypical of respiratory infections. There you go. Endothelial cells connect the entire circulation system, 60,000 miles worth of blood vessels throughout our body, says Lee. Is this one way that COVID-19 can impact the brain, the heart, the COVID toe? The SARS-CoV-2 traffic itself through the endothelial cells or get into the bloodstream this way? We don't know the answer to that. Again, with the we don't know, the I don't know. All right. I have to sit up. An alternative theory is that the blood clotting and symptoms in other organs are caused by inflammation in the body due to an overreactive immune response, the so-called cytokine storm. This inflammatory reaction can occur in other respiratory illnesses and severe cases of pneumonia, which is why the initial reports of blood clots, heart complications, and neurological symptoms don't sound the alarm bells. However, the magnitude of problems seen with COVID-19 appears to go beyond the inflammation experienced in other respiratory infections. CG report number 16, the coming food shortages edition. It's a grim reality as COVID-19 spreads in the meat plants and beyond. At least 60 food processing facilities outside the meatpacking industry have seen outbreaks, with more than 1,000 workers diagnosed with the virus. These are the first national numbers of their kind. There are no federal agencies reporting the data. The true total is almost certainly higher. Fruit and vegetable packers, bakers, and dairy workers are risking infection as the virus spreads. At our workplace, we were not ready for this virus. We didn't know about it, said Zambrano. Scared, she left her plant for 3 weeks until financially she had to return. People are infected and they come to work. They keep quiet about it. We live survive from our wages. If we have children, how will we feed them? U.S. food suppliers have seen some of the worst outbreaks of any industry outside healthcare. Dozens of meatpacking workers have died, with thousands falling sick. Migrant farms are getting hit also. The outbreaks endanger America's food supply. The meat industry is already plunged into crisis with plant shutdowns that spark shortages. In the months ahead, more food shortages are likely. There are 1.7 million workers at food and beverage manufacturers. 500,000 are at the meat processors. Employees are not kept safe, with protective gear including face masks and gloves not being widely distributed until infections happen. Crowd conditions and fast-moving processing lines don't allow social distancing. A largely immigrant labor force also faces tough living conditions, with cramped housing sometimes and employer-provided bunkhouse dormitories that can sleep 4 to 10 to a room. About 35% of food processing and dairy facilities have had at least one confirmed COVID-19 cases among 79 plants. Fruit packers were told masks were unnecessary and were encouraged to donate inventories for use by health care workers. Where have we heard that before? Wait, what Fauci did when he lied to the public and said that the masks are not helpful. CDC report number 17, toilet release infectious plumes edition. Scientists have found that in addition to clearing out whatever business you've left behind, flushing the toilet can generate a cloud of aerosol droplets that rises nearly 3 feet. Those droplets may linger in the air long enough to be inhaled by a shared toilet's next user or land on surfaces. Coronavirus can be passed not only through respiratory droplets, but through virus-laden feces too. The aerosols generated by toilets are something that we've kind of shown about for a while, but many people have taken for granted. Studies have found COVID-19 can also dock to cell receptors in the small intestine. Patients have been reporting diarrhea, nausea, and vomiting as symptoms, and researchers have found viable virus particles in patients' feces, as well as traces of viral RNA on toilet bowls and sinks in their hospital isolation rooms. It's virtually impossible to keep bathrooms sanitized all the time. Ensuring a toilet may be unavoidable for family members, even when one person is sick and isolating in a separate room at home, Dr. Wang said. As cities around the world navigate the reopening of restaurants, offices, and other businesses, more and more people will also need to use public or shared restrooms. But while diners can be moved outdoors and employees spaced out, people may find it harder to practice social distancing in small bathrooms. Experience with other coronaviruses shows how quickly the fecal-oral route can lead to spread of disease. In March 2003, more than 300 people living in the Amoy Gardens apartment complex in Hong Kong got infected with the original SARS coronavirus because infectious fecal aerosols spread through faulty plumbing and ventilation systems. I mentioned that in the beginning. Stay away from public restrooms. This is more information on something known since the beginning of CBG. CBG report number 18, the Mexican outbreak invades South California. The rural county on the U.S.-Mexico border with 100 80,000 residents, has the highest coronavirus infection rate per capita in any California county. In late March, Imperial County had just 9 confirmed cases of COVID-19, thinking they were in the clear. All of a sudden, we had 65 patients with COVID and were recounted, which was over 70% of my hospital admissions. As of June 16th, the county's health department reported that 4,389 people tested positive and 52 people dead. The surge in cases is partially due to the country's location, right on the international boundary, health officials say. Edwards Hospital, the 150-bed El Centro Regional Medical Center, is just a half-hour drive north of Mexicali, a city with over 1 million residents in Baja California that has become the epicenter of the pandemic in Mexico. Disease does not know borders, does not know boundaries, Edwards said. We're really the community of Imperial County and Mexicali, and what happens over there comes to us, and what happens over here affects them. Edward added that 60 of his employees live in Mexicali and commute across the border to work each day. The mortuary is holding more than double the number of decedents it had last year. We are bursting at the seams, literally. Coronavirus cases spiked about a week after 2 recent holidays. Edward said Memorial Day and Mother's Day saw many parties, get-togethers, and many residents were not wearing masks. A petition showed residents do not want to open when cases of COVID are surging, said Beltran. Public health is higher priority than economic profit or stock portfolios. Economic profit cannot replace lost family members. Humans are at the top priority right now, not the economic system, says Chris Wong, Calico resident. This is the conspiracy that countries are doing. They care more about the economy, saving the economy than saving the people. Future Report number 19, Potential Male Sterility Edition. Coronavirus can damage men's fertility by triggering changes to sperm-making cells in the testicles. Researchers examined the testicular tissue of 2 men who died of coronavirus. 10 of the 12 were positive for coronavirus in their lungs, but only 1 had virus in his testes. Although there were no signs of virus in the other testes, cells involved in sperm production showed signs of damage and swelling that could impair fertility. The most disturbing changes they found in men who were COVID positive were to the seminiferous tubules, small structures in the testes that produce and maintain sperm. Cells had ballooning change, meaning they'd become stretched and deformed. Although patients had normal spage while they were sick with coronavirus, the scientists are concerned that the damage to the seminiferous could lead to eventual reduced or even absent sperm production in patients who have recovered from COVID-19. Because some cells in the testes have the same ACE2 receptors that allow the virus to attack lung cells, men have been warned not to donate sperm. Men who had COVID-19 also had lower counts of Leydig cells, which pump out hormones needed in sperm production, and inflammation was seen throughout the testes. Okay. Future Report number 20, the D614G strain. Individuals infected with earlier SARS-CoV-2 coronavirus strains could be defenseless against the more aggressive European strains with the D614G mutations. Antibodies found in blood of individuals who have fought the disease previously failed to stop the D614G strain. The mutant form was collected from Beijing's current outbreak. Dr. Along said that there is an urgent need to determine what threat this mutation poses to people who have recovered from a different form of the virus. Also worrisome is that the new strain could actually be more worse the second time in patients who were previously infected with the milder strains and recovered. The strain with the D614G mutation began spreading in Europe in early February and by May was the dominant strain around the world, presenting in 70% of sequence samples in Europe and North America. It is now in India, Iran, Middle East, and Brazil. 12% of the newly infected in Beijing are in critical condition. Virus was found in the mouths of imported salmon, among other places. Dr. Huang and his team selected a strain of the virus that had previously circulated China and manipulated it to create a man-made version of containing the mutation. They extracted antibodies from 41 blood samples from recovered patients and pitched them against the mutant. All failed to fight the new strain. San Diego reports reveal D614G mutation has the potential to increase the number of spike proteins on the coronavirus and boost its ability to infect human cells by a factor of 10. One of the concerns now is whether the mutated D614G strain will devastate vaccine development, since the current vaccines reaching final trials are based on the Wuhan strain. The D614G mutation could reduce the effectiveness of vaccines that target the virus spike protein. It must be noted that there are also other strains with mutations on them being discovered, with another two more that might be even more potent. So this mutation has made the virus more stable. It has when I say it makes it more stable, is it mutated to make the virus begin to advance from the flaws that it had, because the virus isn't imperfect; it had flaws, and so it's mutating to becoming more and more perfect, I guess. Will it reach that? I doubt it, but it's more stable. CV report number 21: mysterious 2019 pneumonia outbreaks in the U.S. This is something strange. These are some strange things that happened last year that could kind of prove that eventually that this virus has been out for a while and circulating. Nursing homes, June 2019. Cause of respiratory illness still unknown after dozens sicken at Virginia retirement home. The outbreak was reported in the assisted living and skilled nursing areas of the community, where 263 people live. Health officials said they don't yet have a cause of the respiratory illness that sickened more than 60. 20 were taken to the hospital. The outbreak at Green Spring Retirement Community began June 30th. Sick residents had symptoms such as coughs, fevers, and pneumonia. 3 people have also died. The health department has sent several samples to the Centers of Disease Control and Prevention for testing, but no cause for the outbreak has been identified. There were also reports of a respiratory illness outbreak at an assisted living facility several miles away in Burke, Virginia. About 25 people were ill there, including 2 with pneumonia. April 2020. Virginia to review past deaths to look for unidentified COVID-19 cases. Vaping, July 2019. The individual in Oregon who died in July had recently vaped products containing cannabis purchased at a dispensary, according to the announcement. We don't know yet what the exact cause of these illnesses. August 2019. The pneumonia cases linked to vaping are still rising, and federal officials don't know what's causing them. June 2020. Since August 2019, San Diego County has recorded 52 cases of e-cigarette or vaping product-associated lung injury, and all required hospital admission. Other communities have been hit much harder, with a total of 68 mysterious pneumonia deaths and 2,807 cases, documented by the U.S. CDC as of February 18. So far, the CDC has been unable to say for sure what caused the nation's outbreak. These cases can be difficult to investigate. Something to think about. So this is the last report. This is the result of months of research, and it's only getting worse. Props to Daniel J., who made this video, The Virus, in April, that really gave us a breakdown of what it does. He's somebody like me who no academic background in science, biology, virology, nothing, but our passion to research has helped us grow intellectually, and I'm surprised where we've gotten with trying to understand this virus. CG Report 22. Shan Quishi, in his own words, part 1 of 5. Why did I come here? I'll be blunt. My responsibility as a citizen journalist. Keep in mind, this is the guy that China disappeared, and he's been gone for 137 days, most likely dead. They most likely killed him. Why did I come here? I'll be blunt. My responsibility as a citizen journalist. If you're a journalist and catastrophe strikes, what kind of journalist are you if you dare not rush to the front line in a disaster? So I took the last high-speed train in. My first 2 days in Wuhan, I went to the Wuhan Central Hospital, number 11 hospital twice, supermarkets in Wuhan. I went with volunteers to donate supplies, Sihei Hospital. I went to the construction site of Hoshinshan Hospital. I went to Wuhan number 5, People's Hospital, the place where many doctors are rumored infected. I need to take some liquids because my throat's getting dry. We're at the last stretch. Hang in there, buddies. Down the wrong pipe. God. Excuse me. You know, you just hate it when you read something and you're careless and it goes down the wrong pipe. Wait, now I gotta wake him. Anyways, I went to the construction site of Hoshishan Hospital. I went to Wuhan number 5 People's Hospital, the place where many doctors are rumored infected. It's gonna be an hour and a half. Okay. Sorry about that. Shouldn't have rushed. It's impossible for me to interview leaders of the hospital because all medical workers receive orders not to take interviews. They confiscate doctors' phones, keeping them from spreading news. Now we already know the 8 rumor mongers arrested at the beginning. Seems like they are all doctors. They talked about the virus in their WeChat groups. I made a video a few days back saying civilian groups in Wuhan are disorganized. Soon I was proven wrong. Some volunteer groups reached out. Some drove medical workers to work. Some are in charge of transporting and unloading goods because there are supplies coming in from Wuhan. They are in charge of unloading them and sending them to the hospitals. I added them on WeChat. I will participate in their activity, but I could see they are under tremendous workload. They don't have it easy. The Chinese public don't trust the Red Cross. They send small packages to the hospitals, but in fact, they are very inefficient. Think about it. Hospitals have to get workers to open them one by one. A truckload directly to the hospital is the best case scenario. Volunteers have to help. I saw a volunteer's WeChat woman saying that the police is asking them for supplies. Where are all the donations received by the government? Why is the government asking us civilian groups for supplies? The situation is still a mess. Part 2. Part 2 of 5. Like I said, I visited people in the Hoshinshan Hospital construction site. Workers on site are working so hard. Workers are on 2 or 3 shifts, working 24 hours. Managers have no time to rest. I hate the saying, do the labor, don't complain. Now, I don't use profanity. I'll make an exception for this great man. Why the fuck should they do the labor and not complain? Yesterday on the 29th, I went to Wuhan number 5 People's Hospital. Gotta fix that typo. Okay. There were not many people, but I talked to some patients. This time more in depth. Before this, I went to Wuhan Central Hospital. There were fewer people due to New Year's Eve. Then I went to other hospitals, fewer people as well. This is due to a few reasons. First, most people are sealed away at home. Remember, China welded people into their apartments, and so many of them died in their homes, either starved to death, whole families, or died from the virus with no help. People were jumping out windows. It was horrible. The WHO, the World Health Organization, praised China for their lockdown efforts, but they were criminal. They were criminal, and so is the WHO, and so is China. Tedros deserves to be put up against the wall and shot. Most people are sealed away at home. Some people were not allowed to leave their apartment. So how can you go to the hospital if you don't have transportation? Taxi availability has been crippled to help with the virus. Patients rely on 120 emergency ambulances for transport. Are there enough ambulances or taxis? No. Taxi drivers also complained that they were asked to ensure supply, but they had to buy their own mask and hazmat suits. Second reason, if you're in a hospital and can't get a bed or a diagnosis test, why go at all? Taxi drivers have the most up-to-date news in the city. They told me many of them, as early as mid-December, heard from friends and family about the virus because their friends and families were locals. They knew about the infectious disease. They suspected it was SARS. Why couldn't we call it SARS? It is similar to SARS, alright? Among the taxi drivers, they start to tell each other not to go to Huanan Market. Some who used to shop there no longer went there. I don't know if Hunan Market is the real source of the virus. I don't know where the virus comes from. Some people suspect the hospitals drove patients away because Premier Lee Keqiang was visiting. That's why you see a dwindling number of patients in the hospital. Part 3. Yesterday, I went to number 5 hospital. People are here for test kits. I blended in with the crowd, stood in line, pretended to be a patient. I asked, how many days have you been coughing or having a fever? Is it just you who got infected, or is your family infected too? Some patients had coughed and had a fever for days. Meds are not driving away the fever. They are suspected, but being a suspected case is psychological torture. The nurse at the reception was registering patients and handing out numbers like, you are number 126. There are test kits today. Go stand in line. Those of you who can confirm their infections, they can stop worrying whether they got it. Some local friends hooked me up with a suspected patient. I followed him to Tongji Hospital to see the process of seeking medical treatment. I talked to him and other patients. Many people have gone to 3 to 5 hospitals and were deemed suspected infections. He said originally he had a glass-like shadow on his left lung. Then he got it in both lungs and other symptoms. He had trouble breathing. Felt sick. At Tongji, it's the first time I ever felt frightened. More than 12 oxygen tanks at the entrance. Inside, people are lying on benches. There are added beds in the hallway and near the bathroom. 70% of the patients are inhaling oxygen. If it's not pneumonia, why the need for this? Because China was saying at first that it was not SARS, it was not pneumonia, it was a mystery illness, but they knew what it was. When I went with a local patient to seek medical treatment, his brother said, if it weren't for my brother, I wouldn't dare come here. Why are you here? The patient I went with forgot his newest scan. Doctor said, where's your scan? Not the one from 5 days ago. The new one. He said, I only have a picture of it on my phone. Doctor said, I need the scan. This is too small. Patient said, can I get diagnosed first? Doc said, it's not your call. We have to evaluate you first. We have to prioritize the critically ill because we don't have enough test kits. Part 4. Not enough test kits? I saw online that Tianjin gave Wuhan 10,000 test kits, but just Wuhan alone has 10 million people. Distributed to all the hospitals, only a few hundred test kits per hospital. There's not enough. Some locals said that the hospital will keep some test kits for the doctors. I think that's fine. Who will save you if the doctors get sick? If you're a doctor and tens of thousands of patients ask you for kits, test kits, and you only have a few hundreds, how do you distribute them? That's why some patients, after going to 5 or 6 hospitals, gave up, because they have to stand in line for a long time to get diagnosed. Only when they are diagnosed can they be allowed inside the hospital. All the hospitals I went to, there weren't enough beds. No beds. That's why they are building the hospital. Yesterday, the patient didn't end up getting tested. Doctors were seeing patients and guards were maintaining order. Patients in the hospital yards, they were still helpless. Some were receiving IV on the bench. Those more well-off had their IVs in their car. They had the IV bottle on a tree. Those without cars just did so outside in the cold. They stay on the stoops, hanging their bottle with a stick. This is the case with this patient, in his 40s, a guy. He steps away from crying in front of me. I had coughed and had a fever for a week. Now my brother has a fever. My mother-in-law has a fever. A day before the lockdown, I had supper with my relatives. I went to my mother-in-law's and had dinner with them. I played mahjong with my old classmates. I was in contact with a dozen people. If I'm confirmed what's going to happen to them, it is over for my whole family. This is what he told me in person. Conclusion. I am frightened because Wuhan locals won't go to the hospital unless they are truly worried. There is no one on the street. Locals are terrified. I heard there was a reporter from a TV station. I finally got her WeChat. I said, can we exchange information? Can we interview together? She said, Lawyer Chen, I haven't left for 7 days. I have been in the hotel. The TV station ordered us not to leave. We had to protect the safety of our staff. So, Lawyer Chen, you have done more than all of us. If you have news, please share with us. Now I know what it feels like to be alone. I contacted the reporter from the New York Times in Wuhan. I saw his Twitter. I don't see any pictures from the clinic, the infected zone. Nobody is on location. That's why I'm starting to get scared. I've been on the front line for 4 days in the clinic. Psychological stress can really break you down. Yesterday I saw another dead body in Tongji Hospital. His face was not covered. This time he was sitting. You hear ambulances intended for critically ill patients all the time in the street, especially at night. There was nothing but ambulances. Do you know how scary it is? I'm under a lot of stress. I'm telling you what I saw. what patient's family told me in person. Lack of masks, lack of hazmat suits and protections, lack of supplies in general. Most importantly, lack of test kits. No tests, no cases. You can only quarantine yourself at home. If you have test kits, you still need a bed. If you have a bed, you still need a doctor. You can't just have a line of patients lying there without a doctor. I'm scared. I have the virus in front of me. Behind me is China's law enforcement. If I'm still alive in this city, I will continue my report. I love to say emotional things. I'm saying this harsh thing right here. Fuck you, I'm not even scared of this. You think I'm scared of you, Chinese Communist Party?